You're listening to Season 11 of Mobile Suit Breakdown, a weekly podcast covering the entirety of sci-fi mega franchise Mobile Suit Gundam from 1979 to today.
This is episode 11.6, The Devil That Fell to Earth, and we're your hosts. I'm Tom, longtime Gundam fan, and it's time to tell you the truth. This entire podcast has been a psychological experiment to see if we can create a Gundam opinion so wrong that it makes you, yes, you, mad enough to activate the super mode in your Gundam.
And I'm Nina, new to G Gundam and wondering if conversation pits are due for a comeback. The answer is no, because they're probably too expensive to make. Mobile Suit Breakdown is made possible by our winsome and wonderful paying subscribers. Thank you all, and special thanks to our newest patrons, Diego A., Davis Z., Ben H., Ronald H., and Lartan1337. You keep us Genki.
This week we're covering G Gundam Episode 6, Tatakai Domon, Chikyu ga Ringu da, or Fight Domon, Earth is the Ring, originally broadcast on May 27th, 1994. Animation for this episode appears to have been handled by Studio Nakamura Productions, under the shared oversight of Otsuka Ken and Shinbo Takuro. The two men frequently worked together on Victory in the same capacity. The episode was storyboarded and directed by Taniguchi Goro, future chief director and original creator of Code Geass. Major Urube now joins the voice cast, and he is played by none other than Tobita Nobuo, aka the original good, dumb, and very angry space boy Camille Badan. Now, the play-by-play.
This is Remote Laboratory Log FC60 Neo Japan, Project HLUS-1N8, Session 23. This is the first field test of fully immersive rememory technology. I will be monitoring the field test remotely to gauge effectiveness and for test subject safety. Today's test was ordered by Lab Director Dr. Mikamura and Major Urube, Chairman Karato observing. Subject Domon Kashu has been tricked into consuming drugs which will render him unconscious, easing transition to hallucinated memories. Test location, Domon's family home in Neo Japan. Currently derelict, the rememory technology will make it appear to Domon as he remembers it. Test memory begins with Domon returning home from his 10 years of martial arts training. Subject waking in 3, 2, 1. Subject vitals are normal and full immersion achieved. Domon is speaking with his elder brother Kyoji, with their parents, and with live participant Rain Mikamura. No signs of later memory intrusion. Celebratory family dinner proceeding as expected. Sensory immersion complete. Domon appears to be enjoying his mother's cooking as much in the hallucination as he did in life. Now transitioning to new memory, wherein Domon's father and brother reveal their project, the completed Devil Gundam. Cue military raid, an attempted arrest of Dr. Kashu and Kyoji Kashu on suspicion of treason. Kyoji admits he plans to use the Devil Gundam for world domination. Subject heart rate, breathing, and blood pressure are elevated but within expected parameters. Now entering stress test. Mrs. Kashu interposes herself between military police and Kyoji, is killed by bullet intended for her elder son. Domon's surprise and grief experience appear true. Now, Kyoji takes off with the Devil Gundam, leaving Domon to bury their mother and to witness their father's conviction and sentencing to indefinite cryogenic suspension. Entering Domon's memory of Dr. Mikamura and Major Urube telling him that the Devil Gundam survived its crash to Earth and that they want him to be Japan's Gundam fighter, offering him the perfect cover to hunt down his brother and the Devil Gundam without raising suspicion from other participant nations. I'm receiving a test override order. Chairman Karato's command code. The code is legit, so Now cueing the Devil Gundam Neo-Japan Defense Force massacre scenario. Subject is now piloting the real Shining Gundam with live participation from a remote-controlled Phantoma mobile armor, which will appear to Domon as the Devil Gundam piloted by Kyoji Kashu. Vitals are consistent with physical strain of piloting a mobile fighter, but subject performance is suboptimal, likely due to emotional factors. This fight is looking serious. Subject vitals indicate extreme stress and significant pain, but the orders from Chairman Karato were to not terminate the scenario without explicit instructions. What the I mean, we have unexpected live interference in the test. The Shining Gundam carrier unit, piloted by Rain Mikamura, has intervened, taking a hit intended for the Shining Gundam. Subject vitals indicate extreme distress, which seems to be causing a distortion in the hallucination. Domon is having a flashback to his mother's death. Original test goal, condition achieved. Subject's heightened emotional and physical state has triggered Shining Gundam Super Mode. Phantoma in the role of Devil Gundam destroyed. Test complete. Memo. Subject indicated at close of test that at some point he became aware that he was hallucinating. Subject is uncooperative and unlikely to provide additional feedback. Further study required.
Oops, I tripped and spilled a big vat of the main plot all over this episode.
Clearly someone thought that the audience had had enough of mystery and needed some of the details of what is happening explained to them.
Or this was just the point at which they had finally figured out what the plot was going to be and could actually start doing more than simply teasing at it. This was also the first episode which you and I watched in the dub, because this episode features the real introduction of the Devil or Dark Gundam, which means we now have a choice to make. Will it be, for us, for MSB, in the canon of this podcast, the Devil Gundam or the Dark Gundam?
The Devil Gundam.
Okay, well that wasn't much of a choice.
No, it's really not Devil or Dark.
How about Major Urube or Urube? L or R? Or as some websites insist on spelling it, Wulube.
Is the katakana wu and not u?
No, it's u.
Huh.
Don't ask me. I think the dub goes with the hard L sound, whereas the subtitles go with the R.
Lots of people asked before we began whether we were going to watch this one dubbed, or at least watch parts of it dubbed. It was the dub that was shown on Cartoon Network, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the version that a lot of people saw as kids. My main reaction to the dub when we first watched it, because it was our first watch through of the episode, was I was deeply curious about the choices they made for Domon. Because Domon in this episode seemed just much younger, much more cheerful and chipper, more emotional, much less taciturn.
They might be a little unfair because this is an episode where Domon is forcibly regressed to a more childish state.
Exactly. On watching the episode again in Japanese, I saw that the Japanese voice acting makes many of the same changes. We are being shown Domon before the events that set him on his current course. Domon as he was before tragedy struck his family and vengeance took over his life.
Mm-hmm.
And other than that, nothing about the dub stood out to me as particularly good or bad. I thought it was a very serviceable dub. It was not distractingly bad in the way some dubs that are older can be. I think we're entering an era where dub quality is significantly better.
I mean, I'm sure like all dubs, some of the voices are more competent than others. And there's one thing, this is a point that is really only of interest to me. As you know, I have a particular fascination with the larger political questions of the universal century and now the future century. When the military police burst into the Devil Gundam's hangar and they accuse Domon's father and brother of plotting to overthrow the existing political order and take over the world and also the colonies. In the English, there's a weird pause when they're speaking, and it makes it sound like the United Colonies, the Federation, and the Earth are three different entities.
That's true.
The United Colonies Federation is a whole entity,
okay.
and the Earth is the second entity that they're taking over.
I see.
I was briefly fascinated and intrigued by the possibility of a third entity we don't know about. The Federation somehow still exists in this universe. What is it in charge of, if not the colonies or the Earth? Turns out nothing. Shame.
Still plenty of political questions brought up by this episode, even accepting that particular line. Namely, the conflict between the Gundam fight and this larger mission of dealing with the existential threat of the Devil Gundam.
But also the smaller mission of trying to clean up this problem without anybody finding out about it. I found this so relatable. I love this, that the primary motivation of the authorities in this is to clean up their own mistake before anyone else finds out about it. Like, they could tell the other colonies about the threat posed by the Devil Gundam. They could tell Neo Hong Kong, which we now find out is the current ruler of the world. They could tell them what happened, but then they would get in trouble. And they think they can solve the problem on their own through the power of Domon and the Shining Gundam. It's so short-sighted, and it's so...
Classic politics.
Classic politics and dangerous, but also eminently relatable. Whomst among us has not made some sort of mistake and then thought, ooh, I can clean this up before anybody finds out. I don't have to deal with the consequences of this.
And that you have these different government factions with conflicting goals. Karato seems like out and out evil, the way he laughs at various points in this episode about what's happening, and his comment to the others, oh, don't worry, if something happens to Domon, I'm sure I can get the committee to accept a replacement Gundam fighter representative for Neo Japan. He's not worried about Domon dying, he's worried about their place in the Gundam fight.
Which, to be fair, is his job. He's the chairman of the Neo Japan Gundam Fight Committee. His job is to find a good Gundam fighter who will win Gundam fights. And here's Domon, a very competent martial artist piloting a very good Gundam who is nonetheless fighting most of his matches to a draw. He's only won 2 matches at this point, and one of those was under very suspect circumstances. So I can understand how, from his perspective, Domon, his employee at Gundam fighting, is not doing his job. Now, laughing evilly while he tries to kill said incompetent employee, that's not exactly a best business practice. But still, I can see where he's coming from.
There was a visual I noticed that, if intentional, would certainly cast the Neo Japan politicians in a very particular light. Did you notice that in the fight that they depict between all of the various government mobile fighter units and the Devil Gundam, that first big fight where it looks like it's coming up out of lava?
The ones that look like
Little Zams.
Blue Zaku's, and then the Phantoma, which is the Little Zam.
Yeah.
I love the Little Zam so much.
The Little Zam and its weird, freaky eyeball. It's the one with the weird eyeball.
Tell me more about this weird eyeball.
I mean, I can show you screenshots, but unlike the sort of glasses-like, flat, shining screen, there is an opening, an aperture in the suit that looks more like an open eye, like eyelids around it, and a single brightly colored point in the middle that looks like an iris.
I'm going to need to see a screenshot of this once we finish.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that. I had noticed it has like a couple of shoulder cannons that kind of look like false eyes. That look like what they actually reminded me of is in like Dandadan and other depictions of yokai. They often have sort of like bugged out, mad staring eyes that look off in different directions, like those of a chameleon or something.
I don't even know if it's meant to be a sensor or a camera or what, but on the Phantoma, I thought it looked much more like an organic eye in a way that's kind of creepy, and I liked it. But my actual point that I was getting at before
did you have a point?
Before we got distracted by Wow, Cool Robot, when they first fire on the Devil Gundam and they think they have defeated it, perhaps, the explosion at various points looks like a rising sun flag. It looks like a red circle with red rays coming off of it.
I did notice that, yeah.
Yeah. The rising sun flag is not just a red circle on a white background, but a red circle with red rays coming off of it on a white background, and is specifically and to this day heavily associated with Japanese colonialism.
And militarism generally.
Yeah.
The Japanese Self-Defense Force, some branches of it still use the rising sun flag. I think the number of rays is considered important. So we might need to go back and count how many there are coming off of that pool of lava in the center.
It also wasn't until my second watch through of this episode that I put together, even though they say so in the episode, I missed it the first time. The government official or military official in the mask, he was the commander of that first attack on the Devil Gundam, and the mask is to cover injuries he received during that fight.
Major Urube. This is his plan to bring Domon to the colonies, to subject him to psychedelic hallucinations, to test him in front of Chairman Karato in order to prove that Domon is the man for the job. Urube and Rain's father, Dr. Mikamura, are both convinced that it should be Domon. And this whole operation is like basically designed to get the Gundam Fight Committee of Neo Japan on board with this project, to not remove Domon.
That's certainly part of it. But don't you think the more significant part is that even though before now, Domon has presumably been told what happened, and perhaps even seen some photographs or some footage from things that happened, and is already bent on revenge, his anger has not yet reached the point at which it brings about this transformation in the Shining Gundam. It's possible they don't think it will unless they, thrust him into this simulation and make him live these events, make him experience them firsthand. They need to inspire enough anger in him to make him transform the Shining Gundam.
Possibly. But if so, it seems very unwise of them to have sent him down to Earth without having already gone through this procedure.
Oh,
because
absolutely agree.
What if he had encountered Kyoji or the Devil Gundam in any of the first 5 battles?
I mean, there's a lot logically that doesn't make sense here. Why is Rain not a simulation? Why is Rain actual human Rain taking part in the sim?
She's his trip sitter. She's there to make sure nothing really bad happens to him while he's on drugs.
Rain's father, the scientist, describes this whole thing as punishment, but as Rain points out, Domon didn't do anything. So punishment for who? Why?
Collective punishment for the sins of his family.
They mention that bringing Domon back to the colony violates regulations and puts them at risk.
Here's the thing. They only introduced the concept that the fighters are bound to Earth in the previous episode. So it's not like this is something they established early on and then forgot about.
The list of all the regulations does appear in those prequel episodes that don't actually involve the story. And it's possible it's in those regulations. So it's possible it got established in those 3 prequels.
But it's clearly established for the audience in the course of this work in the previous episode. The timing of it suggests that they had to establish it before they could bring Domon back to the colonies, because showing that the Neo-Japan Fight Committee has no problem violating the rules is important to them. Why is it important? Well, I think part of it is because what are the actual consequences in the real world today for committing war crimes? Unless your country is willing to punish you for them, or if your country is completely defeated and under the power of an adversary that wants to punish you for them, there's basically no consequences. For our entire lifetimes, we have seen plenty of incidents in which a war crime is obviously being committed, and yet no one is brought to justice for it. The Gundam fight is the same situation. What are the consequences for cheating at the Gundam fight? Well, none, really. War crimes and Gundam fight violations are a rhetorical and a diplomatic tool. We should probably expect more cheating.
Speaking of, Urube mentions that the simulation, the illusion, is based on their records, to which I immediately thought, okay, so what really happened? Can't trust these guys.
Clever girl.
Speaking of horrifying rule breaking. Because Domon wasn't actually there, and neither were any of them.
The only person who was there is currently a popsicle.
And presumably Kyoji, Though even that we can't be certain of, I suppose.
We can probably assume that there really was a Devil Gundam.
What do we think of cryogenic suspension as a punishment, as a sentence for a crime?
Well, I can't think about it without thinking about Minority Report.
Oh, I think of Nine Fox Gambit.
Both of which came out long after this, of course.
Because on the one hand, unlike imprisonment, you're not conscious of being constrained. But on the other hand, just like imprisonment, you are isolated for a period of time. And when you return to the world, so much has changed without you.
It is a form of imprisonment that preserves the potential utility of an important and skilled person, if you will. Like, if the government of Neo-Japan ever finds itself in need of a brilliant but ethically dubious Gundam developing scientist, well, they've got one on ice. Because he presumably does not experience the passage of time, does not dream, does not feel anything while he's frozen, it's not really a punishment for him. It's more a punishment for everyone in his life who is deprived of his company.
Except if they keep him that way long enough, then when they bring him out of it, everyone he ever knew will already be dead. That's a horrifying prospect. Depends on how long they keep him like that, naturally. But to have the entire world, all the events of human history, all the people you know and love going about their lives and things changing, and you not even able to hear about it on the radio or read about it in a newspaper or a letter, that displacement from time itself is pretty horrifying to think about. In a way, the sense of disconnection from reality or displacement from time feels like a major part of the storytelling in G Gundam. I was struck in this episode in particular, but it has happened certainly before now. In the opening, in our cut to the narrator, he picks up a photo Domon has dropped after being drugged at a temple. What is time? What is space? Who is this man? Is he real? Is any of this real? That sort of odd sense of displacement and discontinuity is just sort of taken in stride, is part of the way the show works.
The whole show is a hallucination which we are experiencing based on their records of what happened.
And that sense of unreality gets heightened. Domon draws the beam saber and it says G Gundam on it.
When the Shining Gundam enters its super mode, text appears on screen to say, Shining Gundam, super mode.
Exactly. This is especially funny because we're talking about huge robots fighting in outer space, piloted by people who are basically wearing motion capture suits. It's all very unreal. But as with most good fiction, you just sort of start to take it in stride. This is the world we're inhabiting. We accept this is real. We suspend our disbelief so that we can take part in this story. And yet at the same time, G Gundam is constantly drawing our attention back to how fake it all is.
The frequent use of spotlights on Domon as though to put him on a stage. That sense of unreality disguises some of the more subtle things that they're doing and makes it harder to know which elements are worth examining and drawing conclusions from and which ones are simply artifice. The image of Domon's father imprisoned in cryogenic stasis, surrounded by flowers, all of it is very dramatic and unreal. Maybe that's simply because it's a good image and it's fun and cryogenic stasis is all future-y. On the other hand, cryogenic stasis is a great way to preserve somebody as a motivating factor for your Gundam fighter while ensuring that they cannot ever tell anyone what really happened. They've got one witness and he's frozen. Domon cannot visit him in jail and hear his side of the story. That's interesting. Likewise, there's that bit when Domon is at the dinner table with his family and his mom is like, oh, let's not talk about work right now. Domon just got home. We're supposed to be celebrating the end of his martial arts training. And Domon says, thank you, Mom, and seems really touched by this, and then starts chowing down on the food. It's like, yum, nom, 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 nom. Your food is the best in the galaxy, Mom. This is a classic shonen trope. The Genki shonen athlete fighter boy who just loves eating his mom's delicious cooking and is a bottomless pit for food. Is that all it is? Is it only that character trope showing what an energetic young man Domon is? Or is it that Domon is embarrassed by that moment of tenderness he just showed? That moment where he says, "Thank you, Mom," because he craves the intimacy of this family engagement. And then when he reveals that and feels embarrassed about it, he tries to cover it by performing this exaggerated caricature of masculinity. Does he subconsciously or consciously realize that this is fake, that this is temporary? Does he know that it's all going to end in just a few moments? That as soon as they see the Devil Gundam, this pleasant family reunion will end, and he's trying to preserve it as long as possible?
We know that he saw through the illusion at some point, and it is never confirmed in the show when he realized that this was all fake.
Maybe he knew all along.
I was struck by the completely unbelievable moment in which Domon's mother asks him who his training master was. He's been away training for 10 years. There's no way she doesn't know the name of the martial artist he was training under. Come on.
Maybe she's just making polite conversation.
She could ask, how was Master Asia when you left him? Or how was your master when you left him? There are other ways they could have introduced that topic of conversation other than having her act like she doesn't know what Domon's been doing for 10 years. It's not for nothing. Domon is in his early 20s. He's supposed to be 21 or so, I think. So he left when he was 11. Come on. I'm hopeful that the group Shuffle Alliance ends up being relevant in some way. Otherwise, I wish they hadn't dropped that piece of information unnecessarily.
No spoilers.
And we do learn that Domon inherited the King of Hearts title from Master Asia.
Well, of course, remember, he's the 4,711th generation inheritor.
And then his master disappeared.
Riding off into the sunset, standing on the back of that horse.
I'm sure never to appear again. But yeah, once the behavior of the government throws this particular recounting of events into a cloud of doubt and suspicion, we might even wonder whether Domon's mother is really dead. She might not be.
He returned home after she was buried, it seems like. If she was buried.
It would be classic Gundam mom for her to die dramatically and then serve as a motivating influence for her son.
Rude of her to die when he's not there to see it.
But then it is not being confronted with fighting the Devil Gundam that inspires the surge of emotion and anger that transforms the Shining Gundam. It's seeing Rain get hurt, which reminds him of seeing his mother shot. And that is the moment that triggers the transformation, which it almost feels as though Rain's father set up, because he kind of makes some cagey comments to her in the middle of this simulation that seemed like hints that she should be ready to intervene in some way in what was happening.
Perhaps this answers your question earlier, why does Rain need to be there in the flesh? Because without Rain being there in the flesh, Domon will not be able to achieve the heights of emotion necessary to actually activate the super mode.
Which explains why Rain's dad wants her there and why Urube would want her there, but not why Karato would want her there.
I don't think Karato set up this experiment. I think
just
Urube...
the bit at the end with the remote-controlled
Phantoma. Yeah. This was an Urube and Mikamura joint.
It is hilarious to think that Domon is a special boy. Domon is the one true hero because he is the angriest.
He is the angriest boy in Neo Japan, possibly the angriest boy in all of space.
That there is not a single person as angry as he is.
Look, that was what gave Camille his powers. Domon is a sad, good, angry, dumb space boy. He's got the whole package. They kind of stumbled backwards into a really good structure for this opening section of the show. They did this because they had to figure out what the show was going to be on the fly as they were making it. But we see a series of episodes in which Domon's character remains mysterious, but we become increasingly curious about what exactly his deal is. And then here, as our curiosity is peaking, we get the revelation. It wouldn't hit as hard if they had put it earlier in the show. The period of curiosity would probably have grown to become frustrating and interminable if they had put it too much later in the show. Here it's a really nice episode that reveals how much more there is to this story. It's not just about fighting in the Gundam fight. There's intrigue. There's family drama.
And now, in addition to whatever questions we may have about what really happened, because we do not trust the government, there's also a certain amount of mystery around the Devil Gundam itself. We certainly are shown the Devil Gundam in a few different sort of configurations or states when it's first introduced. It's like a mobile fighter torso on a kind of snake-like body.
I mean, it reminds me of that old parable about the blind man and the elephants. It's so big and varied that depending on which part of it you see, it looks completely different.
In the hangar, it looks rather insect or crustacean-like. There's an almost knobbly carapace.
I thought it looked like a tardigrade. Like if you leave off the snake-like neck and the chest and head section, I thought the body looked like a tardigrade.
I always think tardigrades look sort of soft and squishy, and I thought this looked more like the exterior of a crab or lobster, sort of knobbly and hard. But then at the same time, I couldn't get a good sense for how many legs it has or what exactly those legs look like. We don't know much about its capabilities. The comments that the researchers give us about it raise almost more questions than they answer. That it can apparently self-recover, self-evolve, and most mysteriously self-multiply.
Hey, we got a gray goo scenario. That's one of the best ways to end the world.
And the two people who apparently worked on developing this mobile suit, one is in cryogenic sleep and one is on the run. So
I love the idea that two people built this thing. They didn't have like a whole company working on it. They didn't have a bunch of techs assisting them. They don't have schematics that you can just look up. This was two people working in a backyard hangar.
I did wonder if Domon's mother might also have been involved, but that only raises it to 3 people, so doesn't really make much of a difference.
When you first saw it emerging from the lava at the beginning of the episode and you just saw like the regular body and the like snake tail, you thought it looked like a naga.
Yes, very much so. But then you see it's in fact attached to a whole nother much bigger piece.
A big lumpy body, huge weird claws. Unclear number of legs.
Whoever designed the interiors for this episode clearly liked conversation pits.
No, this is stolen right out of Woody Allen's Sleeper.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the interiors of the mansions are all based on that movie.
Interesting. I found it rather funny that Rain dresses much more prim and proper in this episode than she generally does.
I mean, she's not going to wear the skin-tight miniskirt around her dad, apparently. Or maybe
perhaps around the government officials is the greater concern.
Or maybe this was just how she dressed before the incident. She, too, has been changed by tragedy, just as Domon.
I do, however, like her taser earrings. I think perhaps every woman in the world should be issued a pair of taser earrings.
It's the modern equivalent of when you used to use like a hairpin or a hat pin to stab somebody.
Right, you're not trying to kill them or anything, just get them to keep their hands to themselves.
Or put their face on the floor.
And while, in terms of sort of continuity, it didn't necessarily make sense, I thought the decision to have Domon's family home as a wreck, more or less, and to see the contrast between what he is seeing in the midst of this illusion and the wreckage that the house actually is, it was very affecting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that scene where Rain can't take it anymore and bolts and sort of hides behind the destroyed wall, and we see Domon sitting alone, laughing as though he's having the time of his life. It's heart-wrenching. Beyond that, the appearance of Neo Japan is interesting in a couple of other ways. Imagawa points out in the interviews that accompany these episodes that there's a torii gate at the end of like a walkway leading out towards the beach. He notes that this is specifically so that Japanese viewers watching the episode who see that will go, hey, that's not right. That's not how things are. That's not real Japan. To achieve that effect, he took a depiction of Japan from a foreign movie, from the movie The Man Who Fell to Earth, and took that element, which when he saw the movie made him go, hey, that's wrong, and put it into G Gundam, to convey that there's something weird about Neo Japan, that Neo Japan is not Japan. And reading that felt to me really important to G Gundam as a whole. All the Neo countries are not actually the countries themselves. They are caricatures.
Theme park versions.
Yeah, exactly. We know, or Imagawa has claimed, that he was uncomfortable with the depictions of national stereotypes being forced on him by the executives at Bandai. He didn't really want to do that, and he feared it would come off as insensitive and offensive. And of course, he's also expressed his frustration with not being able to go to these countries and do actual location shooting, which would never have been possible given the time, the budget, and the number of different countries they would have needed to go to. But still, he's working under impossible constraints. I think he recognizes that there is no way for him and his team to accurately and sensitively depict any of these countries. It's impossible. All he has to go off of are movies, some of which were made by people from that country, most of which were not. So recognizing that it's impossible to depict them accurately, he's taking pains to depict Japan inaccurately.
He's basically hanging a lampshade on the whole thing of, yeah, we're just doing stereotypes, everybody.
Yep.
I'm not confident enough in my memory of Japanese geography to say this 100%, but it looks as though Domon's parents' house is on the shores of a very exaggerated Lake Biwa. There's a big lake in the middle of Neo-Japan, which is structured to be like the Japanese archipelago, complete with quote-unquote islands held together in some way by cables or structures. And this much bigger than it would be in the Japan of Earth, lake in the middle.
It's like the version of Japan that would be drawn in an atlas for children. You know, the kind that would have like an exaggerated depiction of the country with big sheafs of wheat in the grain growing sections and like a giant bear in the region that has bears.
Sort of exaggerated depictions of what are considered the most important or most memorable aspects of the place. We also now have confirmation, and I had kind of assumed this, people do live on the surfaces of these colonies, not just sort of burrowed into the rocky undersides.
Though they do also burrow into the rocky underside.
Yes, and I assume that's like a wealth and class thing, that like if you are sufficiently wealthy or well-connected, you get to live on the pretty surface part, and if you're not, then you live in effectively underground structures. And that same stereotyping, that same sense of exaggeration, we noted particularly with Neo-America, the ginormous Statue of Liberty, the recreation of Mount Rushmore.
I mean, I've made this analogy in the past, but it's like how Irish Americans or Italian Americans or any diaspora group treats the heritage of their homeland. A couple of specific aspects are greatly exaggerated and a whole lot of nuances flattened over and forgotten.
It's funny that you mentioned diaspora groups because while I doubt Imagawa was thinking about that when he made this, that is effectively what all of the humans living in the space colonies are.
Well, there's an idea that a nationality, a people, is both a culture and a place. That you cannot separate the culture from the land in which it developed. That if you take cultural aspects out of it and move them to somewhere else, they will interact with the new environment and become a new culture. So you can try to recreate Japan in the heavens, but it's not Japan. It doesn't have the same landscape. And I think this episode commits to that idea through the depiction of the ruined temple in Kyoto. And that is a famous temple with a very famous rock garden.
I thought so.
That's Ryoanji.
Uh-huh.
Another UNESCO heritage site destroyed in the course of this show. That temple represents the intimate connection between the culture and the land, between the spirit of Japanese religion and the rocks, the land, the arrangement of the buildings, the view of Kyoto.
Even the temple priest and his comments about hospitality and like, yes, everything is a ruin, but I still have to offer you tea is a representation of the endurance of the culture in the place, even as the place is being altered by world events.
And the rock garden itself is a human-created environment.
A microcosm, right, of the...
There's some debate about whether that particular rock garden is actually meant to represent anything in nature, but it's meant to be an idealized form of nature.
And perhaps an abstraction, but still, the rocks are rocks, but you could also look at them as land masses in an ocean, as mountains poking through the clouds.
I think one of the typical interpretations of that particular rock garden is a family of tigers crossing a stream. And the colonies up in space are very much like the rock garden. They are man-made, artificial recreations of idealized versions of nature. But what makes the rock garden special is that the wall can be broken, and beyond the wall you can see actual nature. You can see the actual sprawl of the real Japan. But up in space, if you look beyond the walls of the artificial colony, all you see is the void.
(1993) roughly corresponded to Heisei 5. Akihito was emperor, and Miyazawa Kiichi was prime minister until August, when he was replaced by Hosokawa Morihiro, who stayed in power just through the period I'm covering. He left office on April 28, 1994. Japan was still in the early years of what would later be termed the lost decades. GDP growth was very slow, at just over 1% per year. Debt levels were increasing, and average real growth rates were lower than those of other industrialized nations. Politically, this was a hugely significant year. In the wake of numerous scandals, especially the recruit scandal, which we've discussed before, the Liberal Democratic Party, or LDP, was viewed as increasingly corrupt, and following a vote of no confidence against the contemporary LDP government, the members of a cross-faction research group broke off and founded New Party Sakigake in June of '93. They considered themselves the baton carriers for mainstream Japanese conservatism, and their founding principles were respect for Japan's constitution, being anti-war and anti-military spending, respect for the imperial family and their role preserving Japanese culture and tradition, and rejection of totalitarianism and commitment to parliamentary democracy. The two final principles deserve a bit more explanation. First, that New Party Sakigake was notable for raising environmental concerns to the level of a core principle. They acknowledged ongoing environmental crises and emphasized the government's responsibility for addressing these issues, both nationally and internationally. The last principle feels somewhat philosophical or vague by comparison. Sources translate it as, quote, embracing the spirit of the times as one of independence and responsibility, aiming to become a simple nation, a high-quality, substantial nation. What this seems to have meant in practical terms was that Sakigake believed the government should adapt to this new economic reality and build a Japan where people could still live with dignity and good quality of life, even though the ostentation and extravagance of the bubble years were behind them. One source also described this principle as moderating Japan's ambitions to be a major world power. Not that they were isolationists, but that they had much more modest goals for Japan's role on the international stage. Excessively modest to some people. Just a day later, the Shinseito, or Japan Renewal Party, was formed. They were also reformers and former members of the LDP, and promptly organized a coalition with the Japan Socialist Party, the Democratic Socialist Party, Komeito, and the Socialist Democratic Federation. When the LDP, which had been in power since 1955, failed to win a majority in the 1993 general election, Shinseito convinced the Japan New Party and New Party Sakigake to join their coalition, which was then able to form a government under Hosokawa Morihiro. The 1993 election results were seen as a backlash against corruption, pork barrel spending, and an inflated bureaucracy, and a generational shift in politics and political conduct. The subsequent Rainbow Coalition, made up of liberals, centrists, and conservative reformists, had one main common goal, which was electoral reform. When those reforms passed about 11 months later, the coalition collapsed. However, it did mean that those reforms were in place in time for the 1994 election. As the new coalition government was forming, another historic political event occurred. Doi Takako, former chairperson of the Socialist Party, became Japan's first woman Speaker of the House of Representatives. And in November of that year, the new Basic Environmental Law, or Kankyo Kihon Ho, was enacted. perhaps unsurprising given Sakigake's stated commitment to environmental protection. The law included restrictions on industrial emissions and waste, land use restrictions, the creation of pollution control programs, and provisions for relief for victims of industrial pollution incidents, as well as sanctions for violations of the law. Despite the spirit of reform, there were still scandals. A general contractor corruption scandal led to the arrests of the mayor of Sendai, the governor of Miyagi Prefecture, and the honorary chairman of Daishowa Paper Company. Then there was the Tsubaki incident. Japan's Broadcasting Act was meant to prevent politically biased reporting, but many LDP members felt that television news had shown an anti-LDP bias during the most recent election. This was basically confirmed when multiple remarks made at a meeting of the Association of Commercial Broadcasters of Japan by TV Asahi director and head of news, Tsubaki Sadayoshi, were leaked to the public. He was quoted as having said, "We cannot forgive the conservative faction of the Liberal Democratic Party for the pressure the LDP had put on news stations, and that now is the time to absolutely prevent the LDP from continuing to rule and report in any way that will help establish an anti-LDP coalition government." He was also reported to have said, "Giving the Japanese Communist Party an opportunity to express its opinion would be unfair." And the Japanese Communist Party joined the LDP in calling for a thorough investigation, with the possibility that TV Asahi could have its broadcast license revoked. Tsubaki was dismissed from his position, and TV Asahi insisted that no specific instructions had been issued to broadcast news in support of any particular political party. Ultimately, they scraped by with a stern warning.
This is particularly relevant right now because, since victory, Gundam has been running on TV Asahi.
On November 14th, Nosaka Sanzo died, aged 101. A writer, editor, labor organizer, communist agent, politician, university professor, and one of the founders of the Japanese Communist Party, Nosaka studied in Britain and was deported for communist organizing. Apparently, he was a founding member of the Communist Party of Great Britain. After returning to Japan, was imprisoned for labor and communist organizing twice, joined the Comintern and traveled to the United States, where he worked as a spy against the Imperial Japanese government, spent World War II in China, operating a spy network in Japanese-occupied territory and recruiting captured Japanese soldiers to fight against the Imperial Japanese Army, and then returned to Japan to lead the Japanese Communist Party during the occupation. He organized protests against the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty in 1960 and survived an assassination attempt in 1963. Nosaka supported a peaceful transition to socialism, which put him at odds with other communist factions, but he held positions of esteem as a member of the House of Councilors, chairman of the JCP, and then honorary chairman after his retirement, and faculty at Keio University, and was well regarded by many fellow leftists. His Wikipedia page describes him as idolized among left-wing intellectuals. That is, until about 1 year before his death. In 1992, 2 journalists at the magazine Shukan Bunshun traveled to Moscow and were able to buy a cache of previously secret KGB documents. Among these was a letter written by Nosaka way back in 1939. Back then, he was in Moscow working as a representative of the JCP and an executive member of the Comintern. At that point, any active JCP members who hadn't been able to leave Japan had been arrested by the Kempeitai. One friend of his, a fellow communist and exile from Japan, was Yamamoto Kenzo, who had been living in the Soviet Union with his common-law wife Matsu since 1928. But Yamamoto had a reputation as a womanizer, and there were rumors that he had an affair with Nosaka's wife, Ryu. Nosaka wrote to the secret police implicating Yamamoto Kenzo and Matsu as spies for the Kempeitai. Both were arrested on Stalin's orders. Yamamoto Kenzo was executed by firing squad, and Matsu died in a gulag. Later, the Soviet government under Nikita Khrushchev formally rehabilitated them both, finding there was no evidence they had really been spies. Confronted with the documents, Nosaka confirmed that he did write the letter, although in his autobiography he claimed to have tried to save Yamamoto's life. These revelations caused a massive scandal, and Nosaka was expelled from the JCP by a unanimous vote. He died in somewhat ignominious obscurity at home. It wasn't just a dramatic year for Japan's internal politics. In May, 5 Japanese police officers with the United Nations Transitional Authority in Cambodia were attacked while traveling in a convoy. One was killed and the other 4 were injured, an event which immediately brings to mind the opening scenes of the movie Patlabor 2, which would come out in August of that year. July saw Japan host the 19th G7 summit in Tokyo. And on August 3rd, the Japanese government issued the Kono Statement, named for Chief Cabinet Secretary Kono Yohei. This statement, issued after the conclusion of a government study, was the first time that the Japanese government publicly acknowledged that the Imperial Japanese Army had forced women, known as comfort women, to work in military-run brothels during World War II. Although individual politicians had made similar statements before and had even apologized on Japan's behalf to, for example, the South Korean government and people of South Korea, up until then, the Japanese government had always denied that comfort women were coerced. So this statement was seen as having more weight and significantly more influence on how the issue would be studied, taught, and discussed in Japan. This acknowledgement did a lot to improve Japan's relations with nations it had invaded, especially South Korea. Then in October, Boris Yeltsin visited Japan for the signing of the Tokyo Declaration on Japan-Russia Relations. Japan was rocked by multiple major natural disasters that summer. On July 12th, a magnitude 7.7 earthquake in the Sea of Japan off the coast of Hokkaido triggered a tsunami and landslides. A total of 230 fatalities resulted from the quake, 165 from a single small island, Okushiri. Following a long rainy season and 2 typhoons that made landfall in Kyushu, there were horrible floods in Kagoshima Prefecture in early August. The heavy rain and subsequent flooding triggered mudslides and debris flows and destroyed 2 Edo-era stone bridges on the Kotsuki River. At one point, nearly 2,500 people were trapped in cars, buses, and trains on one of the major transportation arteries along the coast and had to be rescued by local fishing boats and ferries. The cool, rainy summer hurt the rice crop. Although the Japanese government decided to import rice to make up the shortfall, there was strong consumer bias against any rice grown outside Japan, leading to shortages, price gouging, black market activity, and public outrage in what was called the 1993 rice riots, though there don't seem to have been actual riots. There was, however, plenty of anger and even some incidents where bags of rice that had Japanese rice mixed with imported rice were destroyed in protest. Yeah, not a good look. In pop culture, this was the era of slouchy socks with short skirts, classic looks inspired by preppy foreign brands, and visual kei going mainstream. Japanese streetwear brands were taking off, inspired by skater and hip-hop fashion. Lolita fashion was expanding with more brands and subtypes. And especially in the early part of the decade, there was a fad for paragal, or paradise gal fashion, looks inspired by resort wear popular in LA in the same period. Notably, this fashion was tighter and more revealing than most other styles in Japan at the time, and is considered an influence on gyaru, another fashion and beauty subculture that was booming. The Yokohama Landmark Tower was completed and, standing at 296.3 meters, or 972 feet tall, was Japan's tallest building until 2014. Then Crown Prince Naruhito married Owada Masuko, and Horyuji Temple, Himeji Castle, Yakushima, and Shirakami-sanji became the first Japanese World Heritage Sites. The president of Kadokawa Haruki, was arrested for violations of the Narcotics Control Act and embezzlement. He was later convicted and served a prison sentence. A couple in Akishimi, Tokyo, kicked off public debate about parental rights when they tried to register their newborn son name as Akuma, or Devil.
In the United States, he goes by Dark.
Famous as symbols of Japanese health and longevity, identical twin sisters Narita Kin and Kanye Gin known to the public as Kinsan and Ginsan, turned 101. And Yoshida Tadao, founder of the world's largest zipper manufacturer, YKK Group, passed away. Japan's Association Football League, the J-League, was established in May of 1993, which was such a big deal that J-League won the annual grand prize at the New Words and Buzzwords Awards. Then in August and September, Japan hosted the FIFA Under-17s World Championship, where the Japanese team made it to the quarterfinals before being eliminated by Nigeria. And in October, Japan failed to qualify for the 1994 FIFA World Cup when, despite being tied for first place in their group going into the final match and leading 2-1 at the 90th minute, they conceded a goal to Iraq in stoppage time, leading to a draw that left them tied with South Korea for second place based on points, and South Korea ahead on goals scored. You can imagine the disappointment among Japanese fans, and the incident is still referred to as Doha no Higeki, the Doha tragedy, or agony of Doha. The 1993 Japanese MotoGP at Suzuka Circuit saw Japanese riders take first and second place in the 250cc category and second and third place at 125cc's. In baseball, the 1993 Japan Series was won by Central League champions, the Yakult Swallows, who defeated the Pacific League champion Seibu Lions 4-3. Undoubtedly relevant to G Gundam and probably worth digging into in more detail later, the first ever mixed martial arts event by Pancrase Hybrid Wrestling was held at Tokyo Bay NK Hall in Urayasu, Chiba on September 21st of 93. The Pancrase Hybrid Wrestling promotion was founded by pro wrestlers Funaki Masakatsu and Suzuki Minoru, and featured multiple fighters who went on to be MMA stars. Although they'd been told real matches weren't marketable, and the audience had no idea what exactly it was they were buying tickets for, they sold out a 7,000-seat venue, and afterwards fans and media were enthusiastic about this new type of fight sport. The main event featured Funaki facing off against his student, future UFC Hall of Famer Ken Shamrock. Shamrock won by submission, arm triangle, and the undercard included future MMA champions Suzuki Minoru and Bas Rutten, and future King of the Cage light heavyweight champion Vernon White. Japanese climber Namba Yasuko summited Vinson Massif, the tallest mountain in Antarctica, in her journey towards the goal of completing the 7 summits. She had already summited Kilimanjaro, Aconcagua, Denali, and Mount Elbrus, leaving only Puncak Jaya and Mount Everest. I'm fascinated by her. An office worker and personnel manager for FedEx Japan, mountaineering was her passion, and she went on to be the second Japanese woman to complete the 7 summits, as well as the oldest woman to complete the 7 summits and oldest woman to summit Mount Everest, age 47, a record she held until 2000. Sadly, she died making her descent from Everest caught in a blizzard during the particularly deadly 1996 Everest climbing season. 1994 was a Winter Olympics year, and in that year's games in Lillehammer, Japan took gold in men's team Nordic combined, which is ski jump and cross country, silver in Nordic combined individual and men's team large hill ski jump, and bronze in men's 500-meter and women's 5,000-meter speed skate. In tech and gaming, Microsoft released the Japanese version of Windows 3.1. Fujitsu launched the PlasmaVision M21, one of, or possibly the, earliest consumer plasma TV, and Sega Enterprises introduced the kids' computer Pico, an educational electronic toy. Pagers and beepers were very popular, but the end was nigh. The first digital cell phones went on sale. April 93 to April 94 saw the release of video games Street Fighter II Turbo, Mega Man X, Aladdin, Sonic Spinball and Sonic and Tails, Dragon Quest I and II, The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, Kirby Pinball, Fire Emblem Mystery of the Emblem, Virtua Racing, and Super Metroid.
It's a big year for video games.
Right? As for significant events in media, Detective Conan began serialization in Shogakukan, and Rurouni Kenshin began serialization in Shonen Jump. There were the usual movie installments in the Dr. Slump, Dragon Ball Z, Yu Yu Hakusho, Crayon Shin-chan, and Anpanman franchises, many of which were in the top 10 for box office ticket sales of Japanese films that year, as well as a Legend of the Galactic Heroes movie, Overture to a New Battle, Mobile Police Patlabor 2, the movie, which you should all go watch, and a Sailor Moon R movie. For live-action Japanese films, the box office hits of that year were Mizu no Tabibito Samurai Kids, or Water Traveler Samurai Kids, a fantasy adventure, Rex Kyoryu Monogatari, or Rex, a dinosaur story, based on a manga, Kouko Kyoshi, or High School Teacher, a sequel to a TV drama of the same name, the fifth installment in the popular Otoko wa Tsurai yo comedy series, also known as the Tora-san films, and the kaiju movie Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. The top foreign-made films of that year were Jurassic Park, Aladdin, Last Action Hero, The Fugitive, Indecent Proposal, Death Becomes Her, Cliffhanger, Schindler's List, A Perfect World, and Sleepless in Seattle. OVAs were released for JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Ah My Goddess, Ranma Half, Minky Momo, and Giant Robo. On TV, Iron Chef made its broadcast premiere, as did Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Slam Dunk, Akazukin Cha-Cha, and Pretty Guardian Sailor Moon S.
Noteworthy, it is sometimes argued that the main inspiration for Iron Chef was Imagawa's own Mr. Ajiko anime, which brings some of that bombastic energy to cooking competition shows.
I spent some time digging into what TV ratings information I could find, but the data is difficult. I can tell you that the July 12th, 1993 episode of Crayon Shin-chan on TV Asahi had the third highest viewership of any time slot in the 90s at 28.2%, but cannot tell you which shows were on average the most watched of that period. And even that 28.2% could mean two different things. 28.2% of all TV sets in Japan, or 28.2% of all TV sets that were actually on, which means that I can't compare those percentages across sources. We have a bunch of Animeju magazines from that era, and they include both lists of most popular anime according to ratings and lists of most popular anime according to reader responses to questionnaires. But the time periods don't match up and are frequently of inconsistent lengths. I've done my best to compile all of these into a rough list of what was popular at the time, but can't say anything solid about relative ratings or popularity among them. It's a fun mix of shows I've seen, shows I know of, and shows I have never heard of before. In July and August of 93, some of the top anime were Sailor Moon R, Yu Yu Hakusho, Ghost Sweeper Mikami, Papua of the South Seas, Dragon Ball Z, Irresponsible Captain Tyler, Crayon Shin-chan, Little Women, Nan and Joe, Yadamon, Mobile Suit Victory Gundam, Sazae-san, Get a Grip Tsuyoshi, Encyclopedia Kiteretsu, Doraemon, Kobo-chan, Animated Japanese Folktales, and Yaiba, Legend of the Swords Hero. In October, Hero Express Might Gain joined the rankings, and in November so did Slam Dunk, and the finale of the series Hime-chan no Ribbon, or Ribbon of the Little Princess. By December, Akazukin Cha-Cha had cracked some top 10 lists. In February and March of 1994, Sailor Moon R had been replaced by Sailor Moon S. Mobile Suit Victory Gundam had largely dropped out of the top ranks, as had several other series, displaced by Tico of the Seven Seas and Blue Legend Shoot, a soccer anime. And in March and April, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Marmalade Boy cracked the top 10s. Whew. And I didn't even talk about popular music, non-manga books, or toys. But hopefully this gives you a sense of what the Japanese Gundam audience and creators would have been seeing on the news, reading about in the paper, and watching on TV in the lead up to G Gundam's premiere. Next time, we are due for another Yugoslavia episode. the next installment in Tom's mega history research piece. Then we are on to episode 11.7, Once Upon a Fight in Neo Mexico. We research and discuss G Gundam episode 7 and a parade of bad mustaches. Wa kirei na umi! Traditional Mexican blow darts. Detective Bunny is on the case. The promise we made that day. Gundam Fight, sponsored by Jose Neo Cuervo. So, Chibody is a Speedo guy. Can you hear the eyebrow wiggle?
Nina, this is a kid's show.
Traditional Mexican Kappa. He's been drugged so many times by his own government, at this point he has the tolerance of a rhinoceros. Cheese it, la policía! Donate today to help us find a cure for mysterious anime coughing disease. Traditional Mexican tridents. And someone earns a Fell For It Again award. Ready, go!
Mobile Suit Breakdown is written, recorded, and produced by us, Tom and Nina, in scenic New York City, within the ancestral and unceded land of the Lenape people, and made possible by listeners like you. The opening track is Wasp by Misha Dioxin, the closing music is Long Way Home by Spinning Ratio, and the recap music is Window by 1000 Hands. You can find links to the sources for our research, the music used in the episode, additional information about the Lenape people, and more in the show notes on our website, GundamPodcast.com. You can get in touch with us by email at hosts@GundamPodcast.com. If you'd like to support the show, please tell your friends about us, leave us a nice review wherever you listen to podcasts, or if you'd like to support us financially, you can do so at GundamPodcast.com/Patreon. Or look for other ways to support the show at GundamPodcast.com/support. Most of all, thank you for listening. Are you ready to come down to Neo New York and throw hands over your Gundam opinions? No? You lack conviction. Or maybe you just haven't heard an opinion worth fighting over yet. How about this one?
We don't need an opinion to fight over.
That's the wrongest one so far.
Maimed in that fight, and his face was horribly scarred.
You might have to do that again because of the dog barking in the background. The image of Domon's father, imprisoned in cryogenic stasis, surrounded by fathers as though... surrounded by fathers.
No! Are you ready to move on to that, or do we want to talk some more about how Domon is so angry?
No, we can move on. I'm sure Domon's anger will come up again.
That might be a good place to end it.
I think so.
I slightly disagree, but that's such a good place to end, I'm going to let it go. I was going to make a crack about how I feel like I'm in an old-timey movie having to take my earrings off to put on the headset. Like ladies pulling off their clip-ons so that they can talk on the phone.
Build your own pseudo-conversation pit at home by emptying a hot tub and sitting in it.